Hi there. Welcome to Module 1. So now that we've kind of gotten off the ground and gotten introductions out of the way, I'm really excited to jump in and start talking about content. Now, before we can crawl or before we can walk, we need to learn how to crawl. Before we can understand what's causing climate change, why it's so serious, what we need to be worried about, we need a little bit of context. And so the purpose of this module is to do that. It's to provide some context and in a few ways. First, I want to talk about why we even talk about climate change, how it differs from global warming, how we've gotten to where we are now. How do we know what we know going through the scientific method and the different components of the scientific method? And then finally, where is this all headed? So that's really a 30,000 foot overview of this module, but let's jump in. So um, for each of these modules, I will provide a brief reading assignment, just letting you, from the free textbook online. This link is available on our course Canvas page, and it briefly goes over a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, the difference between weather and climate, how climate has evolved over time, and where we are at now. So that being said, let's jump in. So first off, why do we even talk about climate change? Why does this class even exist? And not just to knock out a science GE requirement, but what's the importance of this, or the importance of this? And the answer is actually really simple, but also really serious, and that is that this is a serious issue. Um, Regardless of what classes you take, regardless of what your major is, regardless of what degree you get, we are living in a warming world. This is happening. There is no hiding from it. Yet, with that being said, there's a lot of misinformation out there about climate change. Case in point, this comic right here. This is a comic that I found on a particular political party's Facebook page. I'm not going to say which party because I don't want to out anybody. But I'm sure you can probably guess. It's a confounded scientist with the words global cooling crossed out, global warming crossed out, climate change, climate disruption, all of these different terms and all of this garbage that's written on this chalkboard. This really horrible definition of what they're talking about. And then a little smart alecky 5-year-old boy writing, it's called weather. There are a few problems with this comic, but anybody who thinks this way very easily goes, yeah, preach it, go on. But the reality is that this is not what we're talking about when we talk about our Earth heating up. This is not what we're talking about when we talk about global warming. It's not what we talk about when we talk about climate change. That being said, there are a lot of terms that are thrown out. I mean, I've already thrown out two just in the past few seconds: climate change, global warming. But there's so many other terms that you hear: pollution, carbon dioxide, greenhouse effect, wildfires, tornadoes, hurricanes, disasters, the hockey stick, the Keeling curve, ozone, pollution. And it's very, very, very confusing to get lost into this soup of just these different words, oftentimes used interchangeably, and oftentimes very confusing and misleading. And this topic has become overly politicized. From Al Gore creating the movie An Inconvenient Truth, which I thought it was a great documentary, but I hated the fact that he did it because he was at the time a top Democrat. So he had a D next to his name. Automatically, half the country tunes him out immediately. He's a Democrat, don't want to listen to him. On the other hand, you have people like President Trump, who in 2017 took us out of the Paris Agreement. We'll talk about the Paris Agreement later in this course. It is currently the biggest world climate change policy, and we as the United States are one of the big cornerstones of it, and he took us out of it. And without us, the Paris Agreement doesn't have a chance of being successful. Um, the good news is as of this recording, our new president, Joe Biden, a Democrat, put us back into it. But this has become an overly politicized topic, an overly politicized topic. But this is serious. The reality is, if climate change is really happening, it has major implications on our future, where we live, how expensive things are, what kind of quality of life we have. Um, there are major implications to climate change, and it has consequences. Just one example here. This is Lake Mead. This is just east of Las Vegas. This is where the Hoover Dam is located. And Lake Mead was once a giant burgeoning reservoir. And combined with population growth and increased drought in the western states, which we here in California have seen quite a bit in the last decade, this lake has shrunk substantially. This is a major source of water for much of the western US. And if this lake continues to shrink, that could have very, very big consequences to people like the citizens of Las Vegas, people living in other dry desert cities like Phoenix, Yuma, Tucson, people living in Utah, Eastern California, and even places in Southern California such as Los Angeles. So this does have consequences. And yes, it is happening. Virtually every metric you could look at, whether global average temperatures, carbon dioxide concentrations, temperature anomalies, and we'll get into each one of these things throughout this module, but it is happening. Sea ice is shrinking, ocean temperatures are going up, ecosystems are collapsing. So this is a real thing that's happening. That being said, what is it? Let's talk about that in the next video.